DS9's Deep Cut Star Trek TOS Deadly Years Easter Egg explained Star Trek Deep Space Nine contained a deep cut Star Trek, the original series Easter egg from the episode The Deadly Years, but it ended up having a deeper meaning. In TOS Season 2, Episode 12, an Enterprise away team is exposed to fatal radiation that triggers rapid aging. With scenes of the Star Trek TOS cast in old man makeup and the countdown clock tension, The Deadly Years became a beloved TOS episode. As Star Trek DS9 was packed full of major and minor references to TOS canon, a nod to a classic episode like The Deadly Years is hardly surprising. Writers like Ronald D. Moore grew up as fans of Star Trek, the original series, and that greatly influenced many of the scripts they wrote in the 1990s. Many of Ronald D. Moore's Star Trek episodes contained references, big and small, to the continuity of TOS, as well as helping to build connections between 1990s shows like Star Trek Deep Space Nine to TOS canon. These references were reflective of Moore's obsessive fandom, as he reflected in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine companion. Dr. Bashir used an anti-radiation drug from Star Trek TOS Deadly Years episode in Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 3, Episode 17, Visionary. Chief O'Brien, Cole Meany, is exposed to fatal radiation that allows him to jump through time. Although Visionary was written by John Shirley from a story by Ethan H. Kalk, Ronald D. Moore did have some uncredited input into the final script. One of Moore's additions to the script was Dr. Bashir, Alexander Siddig, using hydronalin to treat O'Brien's radiation poisoning. Hydronalin was first mentioned in Star Trek, the original series Season 2, Episode 12, The Deadly Years, when Dr. McCoy, DeForest Kelley, discussed potential treatments for the effects of rapid aging radiation. Ronald D. Moore's insertion of hydronalin into the Visionary script maintained a medical continuity between Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek, the original series. However, Dr. Bashir's reference to The Deadly Years ended up being an unintentional and purely coincidental setup for the next episode of DS9, which was Bashir-centric. In DS9 Season 3, Episode 18, Distant Voices, Bashir finds himself in a hallucinatory reality where he, like the TOS cast, ages rapidly during a race against time to save the station and himself. Other references to TOS anti-radiation drug in Star Trek. In reference to Star Trek, the original series, Ronald D. Moore told the Star Trek Deep Space Nine companion that it's easier to remember those references than the stuff I worked on a few years ago on Ting. He might have had a point, as he's clearly forgotten that Star Trek The Next Generation used hydronalin twice, first in Final Mission, when the crew of the USS Enterprise D were exposed to radiation from a 300-year-old garbage scow, and again when Dr. Beverly Crusher, Gates McFadden, and Lieutenant Commander Geordie LaForge, LeVar Burton, were exposed to plasma fire in Disaster. It wasn't just Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine that maintained continuity with Starfleet Medical's anti-radiation treatments. Robert Picardo's doctor used hydronalin in Star Trek Voyager Season 3, Episode 22, Real Life. When Lieutenant Tom Paris, Robert Duncan McNeil, was exposed to radiation from an astral eddy, the EMH treated this poisoning with a combination of hydronalin and letrozine, suggesting treatments were beginning to move on from what had been established during Star Trek, the original series Deadly Years. I'd love to see Tom Hanks in Star Trek, but I'm glad he's not in First Contact. Tom Hanks would undoubtedly be a great addition to the Star Trek universe, but I'm glad he wasn't cast as Zefram Cochrane in Star Trek First Contact. The Academy Award-winning star is a huge Star Trek fan and has talked about his love for the show in chat show appearances and interviews. Admiral Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart himself, even testified to the level of Tom Hanks's Star Trek fandom in his memoir Making It So, revealing that the Oscar-winning actor knows all the TNG episodes by name, so obsessively has he watched them. In 1996, Tom Hanks was on a list of names being considered to play warp speed inventor Zefram Cochrane in Star Trek First Contact. In the end, Cochrane became one of James Cromwell's many Star Trek roles, to the apparent disappointment of Tom Hanks. In 2023, Tom Hanks appeared on Josh Horowitz's Happy Sad Confused podcast to promote Pinocchio, and reflected on his missed Star Trek opportunity and how he might have responded to being cast as Zefram Cochrane. However, Tom Hanks's unimpeachable nice guy persona and his handing out imaginary tribbles to a hypothetical Star Trek movie set is why I'm not convinced he would have made a good Zefram Cochrane. Why Tom Hanks wouldn't work in Star Trek First Contact, having played heroic astronaut Jim Lovell in Ron Howard's Apollo 13 a year earlier. It's easy to see why Tom Hanks's name was on the list to play Zefram Cochrane. The character of Zefram Cochrane in Star Trek First Contact is a complex figure, a scientific genius, and an insecure drunk grappling with a destiny he's yet to fulfill. One of the best jokes in the movie is when Commander William T. Riker, Jonathan Frakes, chides Lt. Commander Geordie LaForge, LeVar Burton, for telling Cochrane about the statue. Tom Hanks's career was soaring in 1996, and so the idea of him playing the shabby, down-at-heel Zefram Cochrane doesn't fit with the types of characters he was playing at that stage in his career. If anything, Hanks would have been a better fit for the idealized version of Cochrane that the Enterprise crew had in their heads. Jim Lovell in Apollo 13 was a heroic astronaut, while Zefram Cochrane pulled off the world's first warp-speed flight with a hangover, admittedly heroic for completely different reasons. Interestingly, it appears that Tom Hanks was never seriously considered for Zefram Cochrane. To celebrate the 25th anniversary of Star Trek First Contact in 2021, Ronald D. Moore spoke to The Hollywood Reporter about the making of the movie. Over the course of the interview, Tom Hanks's name comes up, and Moore revealed that he wasn't a contender, saying, presumably, Tom Hanks's Hollywood profile and fee put him out of First Contact's price range. However, while Hanks wasn't the right fit for Zefram Cochrane, I'm still keen to see him appear in Star Trek. If you're going to cast Tom Hanks in a Star Trek movie, then it needs to be in a role that's worthy of a Hollywood legend. With the Star Trek Origin movie set to enter production soon, Hanks could finally fulfill his dream of playing a character of vital importance to the history of the franchise. While the inventor of warp speed is already taken, Tom Hanks could easily play the first president of the Federation or a charismatic Starfleet admiral who helped to found the organization following the formation of United Earth. Obviously, the casting of Tom Hanks in a Star Trek movie would be a big deal that would run the risk of inflating the production budget and overshadowing the other characters. However, the casting of Paul Giamatti in Star Trek Starfleet Academy gives hope that huge Hollywood actors like Tom Hanks would take a pay cut to satisfy their fanish desire to play in the Star Trek sandbox. For the right role, I'm sure Tom Hanks would jump at the chance to finally fulfill the dream that Star Trek First Contact denied him. They may seem poles apart in terms of age and experience, but Star Trek Deep Space Nine's Chief O'Brien, Cole Meany, and Star Trek Voyager's Ensign Harry Kim, Garrett Wang, have one weird thing in common. In terms of their obvious similarities, neither Chief O'Brien nor Harry Kim had an easy time on their respective Star Trek shows. For example, Harry Kim was killed 4 separate times during Voyager's 7 seasons, while DS9’s Chief had such a hard time that he invented a whole O'Brien must-suffer subgenre of Star Trek episode. Both Chief O'Brien and Ensign Harry Kim had a positive friendship with slightly arrogant fellow Starfleet officers. Chief O'Brien's friendship with Dr. Julian Bashir, Alexander Siddig, on Star Trek Deep Space Nine is one of the franchise's greatest partnerships, built on affectionate rivalry and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Harry Kim's friendship with Star Trek Voyager's Tom Paris, Robert Duncan McNeil, brought the untested young officer out of his shell. However, neither Tom Paris nor Dr. Bashir could save Harry Kim and O'Brien from a bizarre shared tragedy.